What are we reading on our misnomer today? More zones always means better comfort.
More zones doesn't necessarily mean better comfort unless we're taking into consideration the load requirements of each room. And sometimes just because you can zone it doesn't mean you really should zone it. Sometimes it might be better to share zones and just have one thermostat controller controlling two rooms instead of trying to segment it out, because you may not have enough load in a smaller room to accommodate size units that are available. Too big is not good. Part of your cooling capacity comes from removing humidity, but they're controlled by temperature. So if the unit comes on and it cools the house down real quick, that's great, but it didn't run long enough to remove the humidity. So in a situation where you need 3 ton or 36,000 BTUs of cooling, you don't want a 5 ton that's 60,000 BTUs, because it's not going to run long enough to get humidity out.
Everybody needs to do the room by room load calculation, see exactly what BTU requirement each room has. And I think most of the time people will see that, a lot of rooms in certain houses will have a load requirement that's smaller than the indoor heads that we sometimes make, right? So it just makes more sense to combine those rooms together to get the load up to actually meet what the equipment is rated to do, right? You never want to oversize something.
To that point, I've seen it many times, and tech support guys calling in. We've got a 9K because that was the smallest indoor unit that was available at the time, and now we've got a 10 by 10 room with a 9K in it in heat mode. That could cause some issues. Then don't forget that now we actually have the options of the is it the 7K, Justin?
We have a 7K and a 5K.
Yeah, so now we have a little bit more option there for, if you do have a smaller room, we have the option for it. So
rough rule of thumb was with 6-inch metal duct, you were getting roughly 100 CFM per run. And then the other rule of thumb's always been roughly 400 CFM per ton. You walk into a room that's got one register in it existing. If you do the math, that's 100 CFM out of the 400 CFM per ton, which would be 12,000 BTUs, divided by 4, which gives you 3,000 BTUs. And now in that same room, kind of like you were just talking about, Daniel, now we put a 9K head in there. That's 9,000 BTUs of cooling in a room that used to get 3,000 BTUs.
So you're saying 9,000 is a lot more than 3,000, right?
last time I broke out a calculator, or my phone, teachers used to always tease you, what are you going to do, carry a calculator around with you? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do.
Yes.
Thank God.
And somewhat related to this is the fact that, I've heard for years too that, I heard you can't oversize inverter driven systems. Then maybe we should say you must not oversize inverter driven systems. It's like, it's not saying, though, you can't do that. You know what I mean? When somebody asks what's the minimum capacity that the system's going to output, kind of a red flag right out of the gate. It's like, what can I get away with, basically? Now, we do have equipment that's got far larger return down ratio than other models, and we've got that information available, on our website. You can see what that looks like. But some others don't really have that, that low of a turn down ratio. I mean, it's still better than what a traditional system would be.
We don't size to the turn down ratio.
Right.
That's a bad idea. You're sizing the unit to run at its lowest possible capacity.
I think it's important to note that even though we publish a range, a capacity range for the equipment, that is kind of for each different application, that's more of kind of a theoretical number, in the fact that you can't force the unit to run at the lowest possible BTU setting. It's going to run based upon conditions. And what I mean by that is indoor and outdoor conditions and whatever the temperature sensors are feeding into the central processor of the unit. Do your load calculations, size the equipment appropriately.